Oh ho ho, what have we here? This is a sight to behold, isn't it? Not really, but I like being cheeky, so I had to get this out of the way. This is Turbo Overkill. It is a first-person shooter of the boomer variety developed by Trigger Happy Interactive and published by Apogee Entertainment. Not to be confused with Apogee software from the mid to late 80s, which is still around these days as 3D Realms. Apogee Entertainment is a different company founded in 2008, when founder Terry Nagy licensed the Apogee name and logo from 3D Realms / OG Apogee founder Scott Miller. They published the 2013 remake of Rise of the Triad, and the most recent, as in less than 2 weeks ago, re-release of OG Rise of the Triad by Night Dive Studios. I don't know where I'm going with this, I just thought this was an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Anyway, I'm making this video because I wrote about Turbo Overkill last summer when it dropped in early access, and it has been making the rounds since its release. So I decided to do my rule with most early access games not named Hades, which is play a bit of the initial build and then wait for the entire thing to come out before playing more. It's worked well with Baldur's Gate 3, which, by the way, that game is still really good, but Jesus Christ is it long. 30XX, Darkest Dungeon 2, and so on and so forth. I feel like this game specifically is a unique one in the FPS retro revival, in that it also takes ideas from more modern games and uses them to not just be Cyberpunk Doom, but its own thing entirely, and I think that's pretty neat. So rev up your chainsaw leg and get those guns fired up, because I'm going to tell you what's good about Turbo Overkill's 1.0 release. The main setup is this. You're Johnny Turbo, a street cleaner in the city planet of Paradise. You're hired by the local megacorp TerraTech to get the city planet's AI, Sin, under control after it gains sapience and starts converting Paradise into an HR Giger-inspired biomechanical hellscape. Shit goes from bad to worse when Johnny loses contact with his corporal handler and has to contend with a trio of bounty hunters hired to pick up where he left off because they assume he was dead, on top of the various cybernetic monstrosities that you have to fight on top of that. Turbo Overkill, while not diving deeply into the more heady aspects of cyberpunk as a literary genre, still uses some of those themes of identity, humanity's struggle to remain human in an uncaring world, and what it means to truly be alive in some very good background storytelling. This is accomplished primarily through data kiosks found throughout the game that have audio recordings and phone messages from Johnny's Ripper Doc, his parents, and others he knows in his personal life. These kiosks are also used to showcase that the game isn't a complete bummer, by having all of the mercs having incredibly silly conversations, with even Johnny's AI steward Sam getting in on the goofiness as well. Of course, while all of this is nice, we all know we're here for the bang bang, and there's some damn good bang bang here. Turbo Overkill's structure is based on the old 3-episode, 8-level structure that most games in the genre worked with back in the day, and it works well here. I'm mainly showing footage from the second episode here because I never played past episode 1, so there's gonna be some mechanical spoilers. The main thing I want to get out of the way here is the cybernetics that Johnny is rocking. You start off with your chainsaw leg, or Chegg, if you will, clever, and from there, you get an arm-mounted missile launcher that lets you do your best impression of the Macross Missile Massacre, and a pair of mag boots that let you run on walls. Episode 2 adds 2 more new upgrades, Turbo Time and the Grappling Hook. The former is basically Bullet Time, or more appropriately, the Sandevistan from Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk setting, which also gives you Bullet Time. The latter is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a grappling hook, which is to say, you can use it to traverse Turbo Overkill's environments and combat arenas. They can all be upgraded to change their properties in combat and traversal. My personal favorites being the chainsaw leg giving you both armor and health back on kills, and the spider augment on the boots letting you stick to wall-runnable surfaces. I mentioned combat and traversal because those make up all the things you do in Turbo Overkill. They're all combined with a double jump, double air dash, and a literal killer baseball slide that end up making the game feel more like the unholy cybernetic mashup of both modern era Doom and Titanfall. If that piques your interest, you are in for a good time, because it feels incredible to just dash and grapple around the arenas as if you were a goddamn cruise missile. And as you get deeper into Turbo Overkill, the combat arenas are designed with all of this in mind, and it gets appropriately chaotic. The bounty hunters Jazz, Ripper, and Maw in the back half of episode 2 are the best examples, since you have to fight them and hordes of enemies and keep on the move because stillness is death. And this is mixed beautifully with an arsenal of state-of-the-art bang bang. The arsenal of Turbo Overkill is a mashup of standard FPS arsenals and some more unorthodox choices. Most of the arsenal is found in Episode 1 and runs the gamut of the standard stuff like a pair of magnums, shotguns, the regular and double barrel variety, a pair of Uzis, a minigun, and a rocket launcher. Episode 2 rounds us out with the best plasma rifle since Doom Eternal's plasma rifle, a sniper rifle that teleports to the location of an enemy on kill that's fittingly called the Telefragger, and an orbital laser to fill the slot of the BFG-type super weapon. On paper, this all sounds neat if a little boring. But what if I told you that there were upgrades for each one as well? What if I told you that you could completely change weapons entirely from these upgrades? Because Turbo Overkill does all of that and it's awesome! These range from the standard stuff like the regular shotgun getting an AoE stun blast, and the plasma rifle getting Doom Eternal's microwave beam attachment, to the more wild shit like the minigun turning into an awesome flamethrower, the double Uzis letting you ditch one for a slower rate of fire but more accuracy and can also turn into an assault rifle, and the rocket launcher basically turning into the Unreal Tournament rocket launcher that lets you start up to 4 rockets at once and let it rip in an explosive volley. And you're going to need all of those upgrades, because the back half of Episode 2 and most of Episode 3 of Turbo Overkill gets brutally hard. I'm talking fresh playthrough of Viscera Fest hard. I'm talking Doom Eternal on a new ultra-violence save hard. I'm talking first half of Wolfenstein the New Colossus hard. I cite these 3 specifically because they are the only instances I can think of where FPS games were super tough in the last few years, but I welcome it because it means I can balance all of the mechanics and systems in ways that let me enter a state of hyperfocus, and when combat ends, I can breathe a heavy sigh of relief that just gives me a dopamine rush, and it's amazing. And finally, I want to talk about aesthetics, a thing I don't talk about often in these videos. Turbo Overkill rocks the lower polygon 3D model as an artistic choice that I love in these games that Dusk introduced me to. It helps sell a sense of filthy grit that's necessary for cyberpunk as a genre, and mixes it with the requisite bright neon lights and rain-slicked streets and rooftops. But it also adds to it with a disturbing amount of fleshiness. All the enemies are created by Sin making an army to stop you, and range from cyborg street gangs to incredibly fucked up looking monsters that have CRT televisions for heads, walking piles of flesh barely held together by steel circuitry and chains, to stuff in Episode 3 that I'm not going to share for spoiler reasons, but will just say veers into straight up nightmare fuel territory. It also appears to have the side effect of making every single enemy gym really nice too. That's a nice touch. The game's soundtrack also works to sell to the experience as well. The 3-person team of Chipper Hammond, Nikita Jemerick, and Tim Stoney all come together to make a collection of electronic and synthwave tunes that sell the cyberpunk experience and make for a set of incredibly chaotic combat tracks that get the blood pumping. The standout for me is the final track of Episode 1 that plays during most of the final level of Episode 1 that blares while fighting your way through a series of oncoming flying cars and traffic in a public hover train, which is appropriately referred to as Trainpocalypse. Hell, you've most likely been listening to the music since the video started. Turbo Overkill might just be tied with Baldur's Gate 3 for the best original soundtrack in a video game this year. Turbo Overkill is by and large my favorite game in the FPS retro revival movement I've played since Dusk, the best single-player first-person shooter I've played since Proteus and Doom Eternal, and is currently locked in a fatal 4-way with Baldur's Gate 3, Hi-Fi Rush, and Street Fighter 6 for my favorite game of 2023. I hope I've done a good job of explaining why I love it so much, because it's genuinely one of the most phenomenal games I've played since I started writing and making videos about games full-time. It takes a lot of what the genre did in the past and uses it to inform its present. It also isn't afraid to step out of the conventions of the retro FPS revival and borrow from more modern gameplay conventions to do its own thing. This is going to be my new go-to example alongside Doom Eternal and Titanfall 2 for what single-player first-person shooter campaigns can be nowadays, and that is a hill that I'm willing to die on. So yeah, that's what's good about Turbo Overkill. And that will be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.